Right, I'm afraid we have to move on. It's a bit late, so other questions for lunchtime. Our next speaker is Dr. Williams from ESO. And as you all know, ESO is the European Organization for Astronomical Research in the Southern Hemisphere. It's a collaboration of 15 member states, and it's optical astronomy, and they have very exciting telescopes present and to come.
Thank you very much for the introduction. So my name is Andy Williams from the European Southern Observatory. I'm the International Relations Officer there. So formerly I was a physicist, but now it's my responsibility to make sure that ESO is represented in international fora such as the United Nations. So just a little bit about what ESO is. It is the European Southern Observatory is short for the European Organisation for Astronomical Research in the Southern Hemisphere. It's a bit of a mouthful. We were founded in 1962 with 5 member states, and there's been a steady growth since then, and we hope that soon Brazil will become the 16th member state when they sign the accession agreement. So the headquarters is located just outside Munich, in Garching, but the observatories are in Chile, in the Atacama Desert. As I'm sure most of you know here, that the environmental conditions are very, very positive for ground-based optical observatories. So the ESO mission, it's stated in the founding convention. It's basically 2 things. The first thing is to build world-leading observatories equipped with powerful instruments, and the second thing is to promote and organise cooperation in astronomical research. So as part of this overall initiative of Open Universe, this falls certainly within ESO's mandate. And as an intergovernmental organisation, I feel that we do actually have a kind of special responsibility, maybe over and above national agencies, in that we're a collection of 15 national governments. So it's kind of really amplifying this idea of science as a public good. And another feature about this intergovernmental organisation, and this is building on from my colleague from the University of Leicester, who just mentioned the funding difficulties, is that ESO, I guess, enjoys exceptional stability in its funding. So our programme is funded out for at least a decade. So that, I mean, this is something that is important in the context of providing archives. Okay, so we're a Southern Observatory. We have quite a large collection of telescopes. So this is the first one, actually, the 3.6 meter on Silla in the Atacama Desert. This is famous for it's the oldest ESO telescope, but it has the HARPS instrument, which was instrumental, so to say, in discovering Proxima b, the exoplanet around our nearest star. And then there's the New Technology Telescope, and then a variety of nationally hosted, nationally owned telescopes. The current flagship is the ESO Very Large Telescope, which is actually a collection of 4 8.3 meter telescopes, and also operates as an optical interferometer. There's 2 survey telescopes there. It's important to mention the Atacama Large Submillimeter Array. ESO is a founding partner of the submillimeter facility, along with the United States and Japan, who coordinate the involvement of lots of other countries in, I believe, what is the world's largest astronomical observatory currently. And the ALMA project is really starting to change the nature of data at ESO, because it generates so much of it. ESO's main new project, let's say, is what will be, in 2024 at its first light, the world's largest optical and infrared telescope. It have a main mirror of 39-meter diameter, the extremely large telescope. So the first stone ceremony will be held next month, actually. So I mean, this is really happening, and the data planning for this is already in progress. Because again, the size of this telescope, the throughput, the nature of the instruments is changing the way that the data management will be run at ESO. So this is really the core of ESO in a way. This is just a collage of all the different instruments that are on the telescopes. So ESO, or ESO's member states, basically fund the construction of the telescopes. We fund the physical materials of these instruments, but it's actually the scientists and the universities from the member states that provide the majority of the brain power and the labour in terms of designing and building these instruments. And of course, in return, they get guaranteed time, and guaranteed time means that they have proprietary access to quite a large proportion of data. And of course, that's something that we need to think about in context of this Open Universe initiative. Okay, so I was going to show you some of the snapshots from ESO's archives and ESO's process, but to be honest, they're about as exciting as the walls of this conference room. They're very, very functional, and they're not very pretty at all. So in a single slide, this is what ESO does as an organization. So the first step is the quality control and the data processing. And I think, again, like the gentleman from the University of Leicester, with the examples from Swift, gave some really excellent descriptions of what goes into this process of quality control and long-term health monitoring of the instruments, all the various data processing. And of course, as a ground-based observatory, we have this nasty thing called the atmosphere, which gets in the way and causes all sorts of problems for our observations. So there's a team at ESO which works specifically on this and kind of keeps track of the health of all the instruments. The second task is to actually produce the data products, to do the physical work of removing the instrument signatures, turning the pixels and the bytes into meaningful physical units. The third step is actually, and this is the main step really, is to create the database. So, I mean, we're all aware here of the, what goes into creating a database, all the technical aspects of pipelines, all the software, and then actually providing a service over the internet which the public or scientists can actually use and download, and to make sure that it's always online. So I mean, this is a substantial amount of work that probably occupies about 1% of the ESO operations budget. And then finally, the role of providing scientific community support. So the team of people in our organization that helps people use the data if they encounter problems. They understand the details of this process, what goes on at every stage, what's taken in and what's given out. So they provide, essentially a help desk to the scientists. And the focus of all these activities is to maximize the scientific return for the ESO user, and I guess in the long sense for the general public. Now, there's another aspect which hasn't really been covered so far, apart from our colleague from JAXA, is this aspect of public outreach. And certainly in ESO, this world of public outreach is somehow kind of separated from the the task to provide the science data. And of course, there's linkages, but ESO as an organization produces a lot of very nice material. Okay, this particular magazine, The Messenger, is more science orientated, but we devote quite some organizational resources to producing very nice pictures, news stories, social media, planetarium shows. So next year, the ESO Supernova will open, which is a astronomy education center. And there's this, perhaps some of you are aware, the Data to Dome initiative for planetariums. So we think that this is something that should be included in this Open Universe project. So in terms of data policy, we actually have a defined policy for this. It's in one of the council documents, and essentially it says that there must be access to the facility, defines the criteria for general and guaranteed time, it defines the conditions for the preparatory periods. So the standard, it's the same case for ESA. The standard is for a year. And of course, we can discuss later about how we could change the university system of tenure track and the kind of competitive forces in academia that leads to this being so valuable. But I guess that's a discussion for the afternoon. ESO's data policy mandates public access after the annual preparatory period. Now, you can go onto the ESO website and you can download a vast majority of data, even down to the kind of basic calibration, kind of instrumental aspects. But the way that the database is currently designed, I challenge a member of the general public to actually be able to kind of get something meaningful out of this. So it's not meant for public consumption, so to speak. It's really only for specialized users. And then kind of below the line, this outreach policy, it's not mandated in terms of the level of council documents, but it's it's become such a feature of ESO now that it's and in terms of the Open Universe, I think it's something that we have to consider, the role of outreach. And there's this aspect of so we do have a policy on licensing. So once all this data is generated and paid for by the taxpayer, what are the rights in terms of using it? So there's some thought that will have to go into aspects about licensing. So here is the ESO Science Archive. It's a giant room full of databases. And this is what it looks like. So you probably can't see this, but here we are. This is 2000. And then here we are now, or this is what it was 2016. So it's of the order of just over a petabyte. So this, a large contribution here. The green part is a survey, the optical survey telescopes. We have this grey part here, which is the ALMA. So just in the past few years of operations, the 66 antennas on ALMA are really producing spectacular amounts of data. And what's interesting is that the data volume, or the amount of data that we have, is actually not really the problem. I mean, this 1 petabyte is only about the daily amount of data that Facebook deals with, for example. I think the main challenge lies in the labour, the manpower and the woman power of effort that goes into curating it and managing it, and the brain power in kind of coming up with solutions of how to design, what fields do you have on the database that are scientifically and user-friendly. So to conclude, I discussed with some of my colleagues in outreach and in the data operations about, well, what what challenges do we see for this Open Universe initiative? So, you know, we kind of imagined, well, there's some kind of grid. You know, you have various users. You have the instrument scientist who, you know, is really concerned with, you know, where are the dead pixels in my instrument, and, you know, how hot is my instrument or how cold. And then we have the people at ESO, the observatory operations, who kind of have to work with the instrument scientists and also provide materials to the principal investigator science users. You know, the science users aren't so concerned with you know, what's going on in the bits and bytes. They just want the science data. There's this role of the kind of archive user, and I mean, now this is an interesting point. I think someone said, maybe it was the gentleman from the University of Leicester, that, you know, is there a demand for archive services? Well, I know that the archive for the Hubble Space Telescope, the number of publications from the archive now exceeds the number of publications from the primary science releases. And ESO does quite a good job of monitoring every publication that uses ESO data, and the publications resulting from the archives, you know, are comparable, depending on how you measure it, are comparable with the principal science releases. So, you know, yes, there is obviously a demand for these archive services here. So then we get into the, you know, general public. You know, is it really the general public, or is it users such as media, planetariums, schools? You know, obviously we could imagine a kind of separate category for more kind of advanced public users such as universities. And then we have down this side our data levels. You know, we said level 1, some kind of notional instruments, bits and bytes. Level 2, calibrated data. Level 3, catalogs. And then level 4, you know, the nice sort of images that you see in all the public. So, you know, what are the various needs in this grid for each particular user in terms of meeting this Open Universe initiative? So, you know, key challenges, really defining the user for the end result of this Open Universe challenge. You know, understanding the data needs at each level of this grid. You know, what do people actually need? And then a particular problem, or well, a feature about ESO is that ESO, as a large observatory, we provide calibrated data to the users, but then it's the principal investigators that are responsible for producing the catalogues and producing the more kind of scientifically relevant data, and then they have to then give this back to us. So this is a whole other process which I haven't actually spoken about that needs to be taken into account in terms of science provision. So then finally, some of the other speakers have touched on this, the resource implications of providing centralized, curated services. I mean, right now, I think ESO in total is, it's quite hard to calculate, but it's somewhere of the order between 1% and 3% of the operations budget in providing this archive. But I mean, you can get the latest version of the Messenger, download it from the internet, and there's a nice article in there about the ALMA archive, and you know, you can really see how things are going to change. We're not at the SKA problem in terms of data yet, but I mean, there's, you know, significant cost implications coming in the future. So, thank you very much.
Thank you. We have time for one quick question.
I think I know the answer, but I ask the question anyway. What has been the relation between what you have done with ESO Archive and AVO?
And well, I know that I mean, in the weeds, so to speak, they, and in our policy documents, in our user manuals, you know, they have used all the various standards that are defined by the IVOA, as far as I know. And then also there's some IAU initiatives from several years back that also have been incorporated. So I mean, the astronomers who work at ESO are well aware of this initiative. So as far as I know, although I'm not a technical person in this area, I think that ESO is kind of in compliance, so to speak, with these standards.